I sat in my home office, bathed in the cool blue glow of my laptop screen. Outside, Savannah's humidity clung to the windows, and cicadas buzzed in the distance like a warning I couldn't quite hear. It was 12:47 a.m. when the email came in. Subject: line. It's better this way. No greeting. No, dear Derek. Just those 4 cold words and a wall of detachment. I've moved your inheritance into my personal account. It's better this way. You always trusted me to do what's right. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Attached was a photo, grainy, almost smug in its composition. Vanessa standing close to a man I didn't recognize, both holding glasses of wine, a dusky Arizona sunset behind them. Her smile. It wasn't for the camera. It wasn't for me either. It was the kind of smile I hadn't seen on her face in years, relaxed, indulgent, intimate. I didn't blink. I didn't curse. I simply stared at the screen as the truth clicked into place like the final tile in a mosaic I'd been assembling in silence for months. I closed the laptop gently, almost reverently, and pushed back in my leather chair. The room was still, save for the gentle hum of the ceiling fan overhead. My fingers traced the edge of the glass of water on the desk, the condensation beating and running down like the sweat on my spine. The betrayal wasn't shocking. Not really. What unsettled me more was the silence. No missed calls, no follow-up texts, not even a question if I'd seen the message. Just silence. Like she'd already moved on. Like I was a chapter already skimmed and discarded. I stood, walked to the kitchen, and turned on the faucet. The sound of water pouring into the glass grounded me. I looked out the window to the backyard. The stone path I had laid by hand, every brick aligned just right. Vanessa had planted hydrangeas along the edges 3 summers ago. We had done that together. A team. At least I thought we had. That house had been a symbol of something once, our supposed shared future. Now it felt like evidence. The money she'd tried to steal wasn't just a lump sum sitting in some dormant account. It was the last gift from Aunt Lillian, the woman who took me in when my parents died in that fire when I was 14. She was a nurse who worked nights, weekends, holidays, just to keep food on the table and books in my hands. She never had, but she had grit and a way of making struggle feel like preparation. She left me $587,000 and a handwritten note folded in half. Build something that lasts, Derek. She didn't mean just buildings. She meant life, legacy, character. Vanessa had never liked that I kept the inheritance separate. It's just numbers sitting in a bank, she'd say. What good is it doing just resting there? But I'd known better. I'd known to keep it untouched. 3 months ago, she started asking oddly specific questions. Which bank is the inheritance with again? Should we maybe put it in mutual funds? Do you think we should simplify our finances? I'd nodded at the time, said I'd think about it. I already had. That's why none of the money was in the account she thought it was. That's why her attempt tonight would leave her with nothing but regret and a paper trail. I walked back to the office, reopened the laptop, and stared at the email again. She hadn't even typed my name. Just a flat declaration of theft. I typed 6 words in return. Thanks for letting me know. That was it. I hit send, shut the laptop again, and finished my water. The glass clinked softly against the counter as I set it down. No rage, no smashing things, no pacing around the house demanding answers from walls that wouldn't speak back. I slept that night, better than I had in weeks. Because the truth was, I hadn't been waiting for Vanessa to come home. I'd been waiting for the moment she proved me right. The morning after the email, I stood in the kitchen with a glass of orange juice, the sunrise leaking through the blinds like a quiet apology. I stared out at the backyard, our backyard, where 3 summers ago I had laid the flagstone path myself while Vanessa had planted hydrangeas in neat rows along the fence. We'd called it our weekend grounding ritual, a phrase she'd borrowed from her wellness brand. Back then, it felt like building something real, permanent. Now all I could see were the places where the stone had started to sink, the edges no longer perfectly aligned. I'd noticed it a few weeks ago and meant to fix it. Funny how life speaks, in symbols. But truthfully, the cracks had started long before that. Vanessa's wellness retreats used to be once or twice a year, structured, purposeful. The kind of trips that made sense for a woman building a brand around organic living and holistic retreats. Then they became quarterly, then monthly. Then she started calling them deep dives or sacred solo immersions. I remember raising an eyebrow the first time she said that over breakfast, her spoon tapping against a glass bowl of chia pudding she didn't touch. "You going alone again?" I had asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. She glanced up from her phone, which she quickly turned face down on the table. "Of course, these retreats are solo work. I need time to process and reconnect." I had nodded. "You've been processing?" "A lot lately." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Self-growth isn't linear, Derek." That was Vanessa in a nutshell, half-truths wrapped in Instagram-worthy language. Then there were the phone calls, always muted, always guarded. I'd walk into the living room and hear the low murmur of her voice outside on the back patio. But as soon as I stepped closer, the call would end. "Just Patricia from the studio," she told me once. "Didn't Patricia leave the company months ago?" She blinked once. "No, she's still around, consulting remotely." I let it go. I let so much go back then, but it wasn't just her tone or behavior. It was the digital paper trail that started to shift. I remember the day. I logged into our joint banking app and saw a security notification that the password had been changed. When I asked Vanessa about it, she shrugged. "Oh, I forgot to tell you. I updated the password since I had to verify a new card." "No problem," I said. "Can you share the new one?" She hesitated just long enough. "I'll text it to you later." She never did. I could have pressed, but I didn't. Instead, I started watching, quietly, like a man listening to the pipes in his house, waiting to see if the knock meant a leak, or something worse. 3 months before her email, she started asking questions about the inheritance. "Do you know exactly how much your aunt left you?" she asked one night, pouring herself a glass of red wine. "Down to the penny," I replied. She swirled the wine in her glass. "We should talk to a financial planner, maybe move things around. Diversify." I raised an eyebrow. "We?" She chuckled. "You know what I mean. It's technically yours, but we're building a life together. Might as well make it efficient." "Efficient," I repeated. She nodded, staring into her glass like it held answers. "You're so focused on work lately. Let me help with the logistics." I nodded, but inside something twisted, coiled. That was when I called Jerry, my firm's financial advisor, and had him reinforce every layer of protection around the trust. I wasn't ready to accuse her of anything, but I knew enough to lock the doors before the storm came, and then there was Tom. 2 weeks before her retreat, I ran into Tom while getting the mail. Tom and his wife lived across the street. Retired Navy, friendly, observant. "Vanessa get off all right?" he asked casually. I blinked. "Yeah, she left yesterday," Tom frowned. "Strange. I saw her get dropped off late last night. Some guy in a gray Tesla. Didn't recognize him." My stomach nodded, but I kept my tone even. "Really? You sure?" "It was her," he nodded. "Pretty sure she had that big purple suitcase, the one with the flower sticker." I forced a smile. "Must have been a friend from her studio." Tom shrugged. "Maybe. Just thought you were still out of town." I was. I'd been in Charlotte for a conference. I thanked him for the conversation and the banana bread his wife always sent over. I didn't ask any more questions. That night, I walked through the house, noticing things I'd ignored. Receipts tucked into drawers for hotel stays in Sedona. Oddly high Uber charges when she said she was at a secluded yoga center. A boarding pass she'd left in her coat pocket. Scottsdale, not Sedona. Little lies, little shifts. But when you build structures for a living like I do, you learn to read the load-bearing points. Something was shifting under us. The final straw was her sudden interest in simplifying our finances. "We should merge everything," she said one evening after dinner. "All these separate accounts and logins. It's silly. You trust me, right?" I looked at her then, really looked at her. Hair in a soft braid over one shoulder, bare feet tucked beneath her on the couch. She looked like the same woman I'd married. But she wasn't. Not really. I trust logic, I said. And right now, it makes more sense to keep things how they are. She smiled, but her eyes narrowed just slightly. If you say so. That was 2 weeks before she left, and 5 days before she emailed me from Arizona with a picture of another. Man, I couldn't help but wonder if she thought I'd just let it happen. If she saw me as passive or oblivious. Maybe she thought I was so busy with architectural deadlines and client meetings that I wouldn't notice my entire life shifting under my feet. She was wrong. She never understood how architects think. We don't just build. We plan. We measure. Stress before the structure ever buckles. And when something cracks, we don't panic. We assess the fault lines and get to work. I poured another cup of coffee, the morning sun now fully up. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon from the granola she used to make every Sunday. I made a mental note to throw it out. I opened my laptop again, not to reread her message, but to begin documenting everything. Quietly, calmly, piece by piece. She had started the game, but I'd already drawn the blueprint. 2 days after the email, I walked into the historic brick building on Broad Street that housed Wallace and Carter, the law firm that had managed my aunt's estate after she passed. The narrow staircase creaked beneath my shoes as I climbed to the second floor, where Rita Wallace's office still overlooked the live oaks outside the courthouse. Rita had known Aunt Lillian for over 2 decades. Sharp as a tack, polite as a Southern hostess, and twice as dangerous in a courtroom. She greeted me with a brisk nod and a cup of hot coffee she didn't ask if I wanted. "You don't look surprised," she said, motioning for me to sit. "I'm not." She glanced at the printout of Vanessa's email I'd handed her, her eyes scanning each line with calm precision. "Well," she said, setting the page down, "she certainly lacks subtlety." I offered a small smile. "She thinks she won." Rita tapped the email with her index finger. "This is attempted financial fraud, Derek, and stupidly documented." I nodded. "Can the trust be accessed?" She raised an eyebrow. "Did you forget who wrote it?" I didn't. Aunt Lillian had insisted the inheritance be protected. "In case something ever goes sideways," she'd said over iced tea on her porch. "People get funny around money, especially the ones you think you know." Rita reached for a thick manila file and flipped it open. "Your aunt created an irrevocable trust. That means it's entirely separate from marital assets. Vanessa has no legal claim, even if you were foolish enough to let her in. But you didn't." "No," I said. "But she thinks I did. She tried to initiate transfers." Rita's expression hardened. "Did she succeed?" "No, everything's still intact." "That's good. But we'll need to be proactive. We should implement digital tracking. Alerts, login logs, IP monitors, everything." "I was hoping you'd say that." She opened a legal pad. "And you'll need to start compiling every instance of suspicious activity, emails, shared accounts, any evidence of premeditation." I nodded. "I have something." Back at the house that evening, I sat down in front of my computer. Not to spy on Vanessa, not to hack or snoop, but to gather, to catalog. There's a difference. We'd used a shared cloud drive for years, mostly home renovation plans, vacation itineraries, scans of warranties and receipts. It was labeled home projects. Vanessa, it seemed, had gotten lazy or overconfident. Maybe both. I clicked through the folders, past the PDF of our HVAC warranty, and into a subfolder labeled Vision Board Garden. Tucked between pictures of patio furniture and yoga decks were screenshots of my financial account pages, with visible login credentials blurred just enough to seem clever, but not enough to obscure their purpose. There were detailed notes, typed, bullet points listing account names, wire transfer instructions, routing numbers, a spreadsheet showing amounts and estimated transfer fees. One line item chilled me. Total remaining, $469,600, minus 20% fee for private account. It wasn't speculation anymore. She had mapped it all out, and that's when I saw it, a photo of a whiteboard taken hastily. My full name was written across the top. Below it, a flowchart diagramming which accounts she'd access, what she'd say if questioned, and a chilling final note: do not mention until complete. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. My office, my bookshelves, the framed blueprints on the wall, all felt suddenly sterile. Like I was looking at my life through a pane of glass. The betrayal was no longer just emotional. It was strategic. She hadn't simply drifted. She'd planned a quiet coup, right under my roof. I saved the files and backed them up in 3 locations, printed copies, uploaded encrypted versions to Rita's secure server. She'd drilled it into me when Aunt Lillian's estate was finalized. Proof wins, paper saves, emotions don't hold up in court. By morning, Rita had forwarded everything to a cybersecurity firm she worked with. They would install real-time monitoring on all trust accounts, triggering alerts on every failed access attempt, login location, and device ID. Later that afternoon, I had lunch with Jerry, my firm's financial advisor. We'd worked together for over a decade. I trusted him with every professional asset I owned. I passed him the folder of screenshots over coffee. He whistled under his breath. She really thought this would work? She thought I wouldn't notice, I said. He opened his tablet and accessed my trust dashboard. All your trust distributions are still intact. Nothing's moved. But she's tried. 3 failed attempts in the last 2 weeks alone. I exhaled. Can we add secondary verification layers? Something manual? Already in motion, he said. And Derek, for what it's worth, this is airtight. If she tries anything again, we'll have a full chain of custody on every action she took. Good. That's what I need. I left the meeting with a folder of legal documentation in my passenger seat and something harder to carry. Certainty. Certainty that Vanessa had betrayed me. Certainty that I had protected everything that mattered. And certainty that whatever she thought she'd done, I'd already beaten her to it. That night, I stood in the hallway between our bedroom and the guest room. Her perfume still lingered in the air, a sweet, cloying mix of lavender and some botanical oil blend. She swore helped her release emotional blockages. The irony made me laugh. I moved my clothes into the guest room and closed the door behind me. No rage. No confrontation, just distance, just clarity. She had tried to rob me blind. But now I had everything I needed, not just to stop her, to finish this on my terms. By Wednesday morning, the pieces were aligned. I sat at the long walnut table in Rita Wallace's conference room, a thick manila envelope in front of me containing all the proof she and I had gathered. The email from Vanessa, the cloud folder screenshots, the banking anomalies Jerry had flagged, and the latest login attempts from Scottsdale, all time-stamped and matched with her supposed yoga retreat. Across from me sat Thomas Wells, a quiet, precise man with a reputation for dismantling high-conflict divorce cases with surgical accuracy. Rita had recommended him months ago, just in case when the red flags had started flapping too loudly to ignore. Thomas flipped through the folder in silence. His expression never changed, but his pen moved rapidly across a legal pad. "This is more than enough," he said finally. "Attempted financial fraud, abuse of access, and clear documentation of intent. If this goes to court, we win." "I don't want court," I said. "I want it over." He nodded. "Then we file immediately. Divorce, citing financial misconduct. South Carolina recognizes fault when the evidence is this clear. We'll move fast." I handed him the signed retainer agreement. Rita folded her arms and leaned back in her chair. "She's going to panic when she finds out." "I'm counting on it," I said. We submitted the initial filing before noon. By 3 o'clock, a process server had confirmed delivery to Vanessa's registered home address, our address. It was a strange moment, hearing it spoken so officially. The respondent has been served. That night, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and waited. At 4:17 p.m., my phone buzzed. Vanessa, I let it ring. At 4:20, she texted, "Did you get my email?" I stared at the screen for a beat, then replied, "Yes." 10 minutes later, "That's all you have to say?" I didn't answer. Instead, I sent a single email to both Thomas and Rita, attaching Vanessa's original message and all supporting documents with the subject line, "Documentation, as discussed." No emotion, just facts. The next morning, Thomas called. "She's retained counsel, David Lawrence out of Charleston." I recognized the name. Lawrence was known for high net worth divorces, especially the ugly ones. A smart choice, if she had a leg to stand on. "He reached out this morning," Thomas continued, "asked if we were open to informal negotiation." "Not yet," I said. "Let him stew." At noon, my phone rang again. "Vanessa." I picked up this time. "You blindsided." She said, no greeting, no preamble. "You filed for divorce? Seriously?" "You moved my inheritance into your personal account," I replied evenly. "I didn't move anything. I was angry. It was a statement. I didn't actually touch the money. That's not what the logs show," I said. She went silent. "I don't understand why you're doing this," she said finally, her voice shifting, softer, wounded. "This doesn't have to be a war." "It's not. This is closure. You're being vindictive." "No," I said. "I'm being finished." She hung up. Later that evening, Thomas received a formal email from David Lawrence requesting a phone conference to clarify the financial situation. We scheduled it for the following morning. I joined by speakerphone from Rita's office. "Mr. Monroe," Lawrence began, tone careful and clipped, "my client has informed me there may have been a misunderstanding regarding the inheritance funds." "Has she shown you any documentation?" Thomas asked. She provided screenshots of account activity and referenced discussions between the two of them about joint management of funds. Rita leaned in. "And has she disclosed the structure of the trust itself?" A pause. "She has not mentioned a trust." "Then allow me to clarify," Rita said. "The inheritance in question is held in an irrevocable trust, established by Derek's aunt. It is not, and never has been, a marital asset. Attempts to access it are not only unauthorized, but potentially prosecutable." Lawrence cleared his throat. "I see. That changes the landscape a bit." "I'd recommend reviewing the attached documents," Thomas said. "We've sent login logs, device IDs, and access attempt timestamps, all sourced from secure servers, matching her email's IP address." "I will need to discuss this with my client," Lawrence said, now audibly uneasy. "I believe she may have misunderstood the legal framework." "I believe she may have committed fraud," Thomas replied calmly. We ended the call without further ceremony. Afterward, I sat in Rita's office a few moments longer, looking out at the window where the light filtered through Spanish moss. "This won't end quickly," she said. "It doesn't have to. It just has to end right." The next 2 days were quiet. Vanessa didn't call, didn't text. On Friday morning, I stopped by Brightstone Bank, where Vanessa and I had held our joint accounts for years. I asked to speak with Harold, the manager, who had helped us refinance our mortgage 2 years earlier. He welcomed me into his glass office and pulled up our accounts. "There's been a lot of activity lately," he said, scanning the screen. "Significant withdrawals over the past 3 months. How significant?" He turned the monitor toward me. "Regular transfers, starting small, then increasing. The most recent was $47,000, 2 weeks ago." The receiving account was listed under Vanessa Monroe, Northern Lakes Credit Union, an out-of-state institution I'd never heard of. I asked him to print 6 months of transaction history. By the time I returned to Thomas's office, I had more than enough. Total amount siphoned, $178,250, quietly transferred from our joint accounts into an account she'd opened in Scottsdale, Arizona. Thomas reviewed the documents, eyes narrowing. "She's been building a life out there, while still living off this one," I said. His assistant entered the room. "David Lawrence is on the line." Thomas took the call on speaker. "I've received the trust documentation," Lawrence began. "It appears my client may have misrepresented certain aspects of the financial situation." "That appears to be the case," Thomas replied, deadpan. Lawrence hesitated. Given this, I believe it would benefit both parties to discuss revised approach to settlement. My client has already filed for divorce citing financial misconduct. Your client is facing a clear trail of fraudulent activity. We'll proceed unless a compelling offer is made. Fast. The call ended. Thomas C. turned to me. He'll drop her by Monday. No attorney with half a reputation wants to walk into court with this hanging over them. I nodded. Good. What about the money she already took? He asked. You want to pursue recovery? I want to document everything. Let her explain it to a judge. Thomas smiled slightly. We'll give her the chance. By Sunday morning, the silence had grown louder than any argument could have been. Vanessa hadn't responded to my last message. No calls, no late-night let's talk texts. She was retreating, recalibrating, trying to figure out where her plan had gone sideways. I didn't need to guess. I already knew. At 9:13 a.m., Rita forwarded me a report from the trust company's digital monitoring team. The subject line was, "Full update, attempted access log, Scottsdale origin." Inside, it detailed 3 new unauthorized access attempts, all traced back to an IP address in Scottsdale, Arizona, within a 48-hour window. Same device ID, same geolocation. The timestamps lined up almost exactly with the time she had been texting me casually, asking vague questions about when we could talk. She hadn't stopped trying. She just got smarter about hiding it. Or so she thought. The email ended with a note from Rita. All attempts logged, no breach, surveillance software functioning as intended. I exhaled slowly and stood by the kitchen window, staring at the driveway where her car had once sat. The space looked cleaner now, open, free. That afternoon, I took a walk across the street to visit Tom, our neighbor, the retired Navy guy who always noticed more than he let on. Hey, I said, knocking gently on his screen door. Got a second? He waved me in and offered a cold soda like he always did. We sat in lawn chairs on his back porch. You mentioned someone dropping Vanessa off a few weeks ago, I said. Gray Tesla late at night. Tom nodded. Big guy, beard. Looked younger than you, no offense. None taken. Would you recognize him again? He nodded again. Sure, why? I showed him the photo that had come with Vanessa's infamous email. The one with her and the man on a balcony, wine glasses raised like a toast to their theft. Tom squinted. Yeah, that's him. You'd be willing to provide a statement? His answer was immediate. Of course, back at home I dug deeper, Jason Berkeley. I'd pulled the name from Vanessa's final frantic text. His name is Jason. He's just helping me through this. A quick search turned up a LinkedIn profile. Yoga instructor in Scottsdale, former investment banker. Left finance 3 years ago to pursue deeper human connection. Of course he did. By Monday morning, everything was in motion. Philip Barnes, Vanessa's new attorney, had replaced David Lawrence. Barnes was a name even I knew. A scorched-earth litigator who prided himself on burying adversaries in paperwork and intimidation. Thomas wasn't impressed. He's filed for an emergency hearing, Thomas said over the phone. Wants to challenge the financial misconduct claim. Says his client has evidence that you jointly discussed all transactions. She's grasping, I replied. Thomas chuckled. I hope Barnes is ready to digest the package I'm about to send. That afternoon, Thomas hand-delivered a thick folder to Barnes's office. Inside was everything. The trust's irrevocable structure logs of every failed access attempt, cloud storage screenshots of Vanessa's planning notes, the Scottsdale apartment, least the bank trail of nearly $180,000, Tom's signed notarized statement identifying Jason, a printed timeline, cross-referencing her travel with financial activity by 5 p.m. Thomas's phone buzzed. Barnes was requesting an urgent, off-the-record meeting. He's seen enough, Thomas told me afterward. He's proposing a deal. Let's hear it. She keeps what she's already taken from joint accounts, no further claims. You keep everything else, house, trust, assets, clean break. I shook my head. Counter. She returns half of the stolen money, signs a non-disclosure agreement. I won't pursue criminal fraud charges. Thomas raised an eyebrow. You're being generous. I'm being done. 2 days later, on the morning of what would have been our emergency hearing, Vanessa and Barnes arrived at the courthouse. I sat in a private consultation room, dressed in a navy blazer, unbothered. Calm. Thomas walked in with a signed copy of the settlement agreement already prepared. Vanessa's eyes flicked toward the room where I waited but didn't meet mine. Through the glass wall, I watched Barnes lean over and whisper in her ear. She looked visibly shaken, her hands clenched in her lap. Thomas handed her the file of evidence. Again. She opened it and skimmed the contents like someone hoping the ending had somehow changed. It hadn't. 10 minutes later, they entered the room. My client accepts the terms, Barnes said formally. Thomas slid the agreement across the table. Vanessa didn't read it. She signed with a slightly trembling hand. I signed next, then slid a second envelope across the table. What's this? She asked, her first words in days. Passwords. To the alarm, cloud storage, anything you might need to collect your things. She hesitated, then took it. Her eyes searched my face, looking for fury, for sadness, for something. But there was nothing left to give her. It was never about the money, I said quietly. That would have been easier. Barnes touched her elbow, motioning for her to leave. She rose, hesitated, and then followed him out. She didn't look back. I didn't expect her to. 6 months passed. Summer faded into the soft golden edges of fall, and with it, everything that used to define my life went quiet. I sold the house on Ashton Terrace at the end of July. A young couple with twin toddlers bought it. They loved the wraparound porch, the hydrangeas lining the stone path. He was a teacher. She worked at the local children's hospital. They reminded me of who Vanessa and I used to pretend to be. I let them keep the porch swing. The morning I handed over the keys, I didn't feel regret. Just stillness. The kind that comes after a storm, when the sky is clean and the air smells like beginning again. I moved into a loft above my office downtown. Exposed brick, warm wood beams, floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the marina. It was quieter, smaller, purposefully sparse. I bought less furniture, kept fewer things. Freedom felt like space. Most days I walked to work. No traffic, no detours. Just a 10-minute stroll through Charleston's cobblestone streets. I started each morning with black coffee and an old jazz record spinning in the background. The clutter was gone, from my home, from my mind. It wasn't the life I thought I'd be living at 44, but it felt like mine. I spent the summer working on something that mattered, the Lillian Foundation, named after my aunt. Rita helped me file the paperwork. The trust was restructured, protected under its own nonprofit status. Its mission was simple: to fund architectural scholarships for high school students who had lost one or both parents. We awarded the first scholarship in September, a 17-year-old girl named Raina from a small town in southern Georgia. She'd lost her father in a car accident 2 years earlier and dreamed of designing sustainable community centers in underserved areas. Her essay opened with the line, "I want to design places where people heal." Aunt Lillian would have loved her. Rita joined me at the small ceremony. We sat beside each other under a white tent on the campus lawn as Raina gave her speech, voice shaking, eyes bright. "She's got a fire," Rita whispered. "Yeah," I said. "She reminds me of someone." Later that week, as I sorted through a stack of mail in my building's lobby, I found an unmarked envelope. No return address. Thin. Tidy. Inside was a check for exactly $89,125, the amount Vanessa still owed. From the settlement. Folded inside was a small note, typed in her usual overly spaced font. The rest of what I owed, not just the money, no signature, none needed. I stared at the check for a long moment. Not because I needed the money, it would go straight into the foundation, but because of what it meant. Closure doesn't always arrive with fireworks or apology. Sometimes it slips in quietly, like a last chapter you didn't know you needed. That evening I walked down to the riverfront, where Vanessa and I had once talked about opening a joint wellness venture. It was just an idea then, something we'd scribbled on napkins over wine. She'd design the treatments, I'd build the space, a place for healing. Turns out, I built it anyway, just not for her. I sat on a bench and watched the cargo ships ease through the harbor, their silhouettes heavy with purpose. The sky was painted in strokes of orange and rose gold, the kind of sunset you can't buy, can't fake, can't ruin. My phone buzzed, a message from Jerry. "Dinner still on for 7? I'm bringing that architect I mentioned." I looked at the time. Just enough to head home, change, and get to the restaurant. Just enough to say yes to something new. I stood, slipped the check into my coat pocket, and walked toward the future. Sometimes the strongest revenge isn't what you take away, it's what you build after.